So, you're thinking about possibly buying a home, but you have absolutely no idea what to expect. Maybe you've never bought a home before, or maybe it's just been a minute since you bought your last home. Well, that's what this video is all about, and we're going to get after it right now. Hey there, this is Shawna Brooks and welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, please be sure to hit that like button, smash the subscribe button. We are glad to have you with us. My husband Jason and I and the rest of our team, we help people all around the Indianapolis area. So whether you're making a move next week, next month, next year, does not matter. Feel free to reach out and we are more than happy to help you any way we can. So in this video, we are going to talk about all of the different aspects that go into creating a purchase agreement. I mean, you are getting ready to enter an 8-page contract. At least that's what it is here in the state of Indiana. I don't know where you're watching this from, but pretty much anywhere in the state of Indiana, we all use the same state form. So we're just going to go through here. I'm going to give you things to be aware of, and depending on your price point, depending on if you're in a multiple offer situation, I'm also going to give you some helpful hints for doing what it takes to get your offer accepted. So let's get started. First thing, your name on the purchase agreement. Make sure that you tell your realtor exactly how you want your name to appear. For example, if you go by Danny, but on a legal contract, you want your name to be Daniel R. Jones, for example, then make sure that they are clear on that and they put in your name the way that you want it on the purchase agreement. The next thing you're going to see on the purchase agreement is a paragraph for appliances and other miscellaneous items. Now, let's say, for example, you have fallen in love with a home and the seller has offered to leave all of the kitchen appliances. That would be great. But if you do not specifically put those appliances right there in that paragraph on the purchase agreement, then they are not included. The purchase agreement and everything that is in that document supersedes any form of advertising that previously took place. The next thing you're going to see on the contract is the actual purchase price. Now, if you are in a certain price point, and I'm just going to say anywhere as of the recording of this video in September 2023, if you are anywhere in the Indianapolis area and you are searching for a home priced at or below, I'm just going to say $250,000, it is still an extremely competitive market. Why is that? Well, $250,000 or below is the price point that the biggest number of buyers can still afford. Interest rates, as you know, have gone up over recent months. So every time the interest rate goes up, that means there are some buyers that just got eliminated from the pool of buyers. But in that $250,000 or less price point, it is still extremely competitive. So knowing this going into it, I want you to be mindful of a couple of things. If the home just hit the market, it's in great condition, it's being marketed at full potential, just know you are more than likely going to have to offer over asking price in order to get it. So if $250,000 is your absolute max, then please do not go and fall in love with a house priced at $250,000, because it very well could take at least $265,000 in order for you to get that house. Instead, if $250,000 is your max, for example, then I would suggest not looking at homes priced above $235,000, so that if you a brand new home at $235,000 hits the market, it very well may take $250,000 in order for you to get that house. Now, that changes if the home has been sitting on the market a minute. If it's been on the market maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 30 days, something like that, then okay, now you're probably not going to have to offer over asking price in order to get it. I am specifically talking about homes that just hit the market, that everyone and their brother wants to see, and you just know it's going to go fast. Be prepared to offer over asking price in order to get it. The next part of the purchase agreement you're going to see deals with earnest money. Now, typically the earnest money is about 1% of the purchase price of the home. So again, if we're at that $250 mark, then your earnest money is going to be at least $2,500. Again, because we are in a very, very popular price point, I would recommend maybe making your earnest money a little higher than 1%. And what is earnest money? What's the point? Well, earnest money shows the seller that you are earnest about going through with the purchase agreement. See, when that seller accepts your offer, they're going to be taking their home off the market, and they're going to be trusting that you really are going to go through with it. And as long as everything goes smoothly and you do what you say you're going to do, there's not a problem. That earnest money will show up as a credit to you at closing, and it will actually come off of the amount that you have to bring to closing for your down payment. So again, for example, let's say you're making an offer on a $250,000 home. Let's say your earnest money amount is $3,000. Let's say your down payment amount, you were planning on putting $20,000 down towards the purchase of the home. Then at closing, you've already got $3,000 of that taken care of for you. So then you would only be bringing $17,000 to finish up your down payment. Now, a couple of important things to keep in mind with regard to earnest money. Number one, as soon as your offer is accepted by the seller, that earnest money check is going to be due. So I always like to warn people, in case you need to transfer money from a money market account or from savings to checking, whatever, just know that that check is going to get cashed immediately. Now, here's another thing for you to remember that is very important about the earnest money. You know, if we're going along and the home inspection's fine, the appraisal's fine, everything's good, then like we mentioned before, that money is just going to show up to you as a credit at closing. Now, if everything's going fine, the inspection's fine, the appraisal's fine, but one day you wake up and you just decide, I don't want this house anymore, you will lose your earnest money. So know that going into it. The next part of the purchase agreement deals with your type of financing. Are you going to be using an FHA mortgage? Are you a veteran and you're going to be using a VA loan? Thank you for your service, by the way. Are you a cash buyer? Are you a conventional buyer? Conventional could be putting 5% down, 10, 20, 30, whatever percentage. And this is important to factor in, because if you are an FHA or a VA buyer, typically those offers are less appealing to sellers. And the reason for that is because the government's involved and the government has more hoops to jump through. So a clean cash offer is always the seller's favorite. Next favorite would be a conventional offer with a buyer that's putting at least 20% down. Now, if you are an FHA or a VA buyer, don't lose heart. I'm going to give you some tips a little bit later on in the video that can show you how to sweeten the deal and make your offer more appealing. But just know, the next part of the purchase agreement, we have to fully disclose what type of financing we're going to be using, and we want to make sure that we have a pre-approval letter that matches our purchase price and the type of financing that we're going to be using. Another thing that is in that same paragraph where we deal with type of financing is closing costs. Now, at the end of the day, the seller only cares about how much they are going to walk away with at the closing table, at the end of the day. Now, if you offer a seller $250,000 for their home and you ask them to pay $3,000 towards your closing costs. Now, see, there are buyer closing costs and there are seller closing costs. The sellers have closing costs of their own. The buyers have closing costs of their own. So again, if you offer $250 to purchase a seller's home and you ask for that seller to pay $3,000 towards your closing costs, then do the math. You really offered that seller $247,000. $250 minus $3,000 that you're wanting for them to pay for as well. So again, in this case scenario, if you've saved for a down payment, but you haven't quite saved for a down payment and closing costs, that's okay. It's not a deal breaker, but keep in mind that if you need to, if you're trying to make an offer of $250 and you need them to pay $3,000 towards your closing costs, then you're going to need to offer $253 in order to make sure that $3,000 is covered and you're giving them a true offer of $250,000. The next thing you're going to see on the purchase agreement is closing date. And closing date is very closely tied to the type of financing that we just identified in the previous paragraph. So if you are an FHA or a VA buyer, just know that it's going to take, for FHA, most lenders can get it done in 30 days. Sometimes VA loans take a little longer. So if you are an FHA or a VA buyer and you want to be safe, then make sure that closing date is pushed out at least 45 days. If you're a conventional buyer, 30 days is plenty of time. If you're a cash buyer, then we can close as soon as we have a clean title on the property. Now, I want you to keep in mind, I'm not sure how all states are, but at least for the Indiana state form, on the part where we put in an exact closing date, there is also a sentence right after that that serves as a safety net for you as a buyer. And so often I see agents that just skip this part. So for example, in the Indiana state form, it says closing to be on or before blank, or blank after blank. So if you leave those extra blanks blank, you're really hurting yourself, because what it means is closing to be on or before, let's say December 15th, 2023, for example. And if December 15th comes and goes and you as a buyer were not able to perform, by December 15th, the seller can cancel your contract. So you want to make sure you take advantage of those extra blanks in the next sentence. Closing to be on or before December 15th, 2023, or within 3 days after final loan approval, whichever is later. That way, if there is a delay and the lender doesn't quite have your approval yet, then you've got a little bit of a cushion there. And when December 15th comes, we've got a little bit of a cushion there. So make sure those blanks are properly filled in. Contingency. This is the next part of the purchase agreement, and I want you to really, really pay close attention to this. It is so common, even among agents that should know better. They confuse the term contingency with what should be a first right contingency. Now, here's the difference. In this paragraph where it says contingency, that this offer is contingent upon the successful closing of the buyer's current home located at 123 Main Street, set to close December 15th, 2023. Okay, that is a contingency. That means we have an accepted offer on Main Street, the buyer's current home. We have to close Main Street before we can close on the new home, but everything is good to go. We've already got an accepted offer on 123 Main Street. We've been through the appraisal. We've been through the home inspection. We're just buying time until we get to the closing date. That is a contingency. Is your offer contingent upon your current home selling? That is what a contingent offer means. First right contingent offer means, yes, the buyer's home is contingent on the sale of their current home, and yet we don't have an offer on it yet. It is a first right contingency. That is a much different contingency than the one we previously mentioned, where we've already got a buyer, we're just buying our time, waiting on the closing date to get here. This other contingency is much riskier because not only does the buyer have to close on their current home first, we don't have an accepted offer on it. So just keep that in mind when you are making an offer on a home. If this is your first home, or you've already sold your other home, or you are in a position where, yeah, I still have my current home, but I don't have to sell it first, that is the type of offer without that contingency attached that's going to be most appealing to any seller. Possession. This is the date in the contract that we're going to fill in exactly when you want to take possession of the property. Now, what we fill in this blank is going to depend on whether the home is currently occupied or not. So if we walk into the home, it's completely vacant, they've already moved out, there's no furniture, there's no food in the fridge, then we're going to ask for possession at closing. No big deal. We're not hurting anybody. But if we go in there and we see, man, the closets are full, these people have kids, whatever, it's awful if you ask for possession at closing and the seller has to pack up everything. They've got everything they own in a moving truck in the driveway, and closing gets delayed. Now these sellers don't even have a bed to sleep in that night. I don't want to do that to somebody. So if the home is occupied, when we make our offer, we're going to be polite and we're going to give them at least 48 hours free possession after closing. We're not going to ask for rent for those 48 hours, none of that. Before we even make an offer on the home, I'm going to reach out to the listing agent and I'm going to ask what that particular seller needs as far as possession. Let's say they're building another home and they would ideally love not to have to make a double move. Maybe they need 2 weeks, maybe they need 3 weeks. And if you as a buyer are willing to give that to the seller and be flexible, sometimes it can be those little itty bitty cooperative things that can be the deal breaker that allows your offer to get accepted over somebody else's. Now, no matter what we agree to, or no matter what we put in our offer as far as the possession date, whether we agree to possession at closing or whether we agree to possession 48 hours after closing, 2 weeks after closing, whatever, be mindful that when that date comes, we're going to be nice up until that date, but if that seller is not out of the house by the time we agreed upon, we will be asking for $300 per day as liquidated damages from the seller. Now, in 23, almost 24 years of doing this here in Indiana, I've never run into this as a problem, but just know we want to protect you as the buyer. So we're going to be friendly with the seller. We're going to be, cooperate with whatever sort of possession they need. But when it's time for you to get the keys, we want to make sure you're protected. Now, when it comes to the inspection report, you're going to get a big, fat, 30-page, scary-looking inspection report. That inspector is going to nitpick every little aspect of the home. Our job is not to nitpick every little aspect of the home. Instead, we are looking for major defects that would inhibit you from living in a safe home that has been properly cared for. Home warranty. Now, depending on the market that we're in, whether we're in a buyer's market or a seller's market, kind of factors into home warranties. Sometimes when we're in a buyer's market and sellers are like, look over here, look at me, buy my house, sometimes sellers will offer a free home warranty to a seller. Now, here's how the home warranty works. It's good for 12 months, beginning from the day of closing, 12 months afterwards. And it's something to consider. It's usually about $700 for that 12-month coverage, but it might be something for you to consider if the home that you're buying maybe has an older furnace, an older air conditioning unit, something like that, and to replace an item like that. I mean, right now, if you have to replace the furnace, you also have to replace the air conditioning unit so that the two are compatible. And if you're buying a home and the inspector says, okay, they're both working fine, but they're at the end of their life cycle, then you might want to think about either asking the seller to provide a home warranty. Again, the seller only cares about their bottom line, so if you're asking them to spend $700, that makes your $250 offer now become $249.3 instead of $250, okay? Or the home warranty is something that you can decide to buy on your own. The only time I would really, recommend that you strongly consider this is, like I said, if some major mechanicals are, getting to the end of their shelf life and or life expectancy, I guess I should say. And if you don't have an extra $7 or $8 laying around in order to replace those, then a home warranty might be in your best interest to consider. Disclosures. There are two main types of disclosures, at least here in the state of Indiana. One is a seller's disclosure. That is a 2-page document where the seller goes through, there are 4 columns, and every possible aspect of the home is listed. And on next to each of those items, the seller has to put whether the item is defective, not included, or they just don't know. What we are going to take a close look at on that disclosure is defective. We want to look and see what is the seller telling us up front that doesn't work anymore, and are you okay with inheriting that defective item. The other disclosure that we have here in the state of Indiana is called the lead-based paint disclosure, and that only applies to homes that were built prior to 1978. And on that disclosure, the seller is going to mark whether they know of lead-based paint in the home or they don't know of lead-based paint in the home. They're also going to answer, do they have reports of lead-based paint in the home, or do they not have reports of lead-based paint in the home? And we're going to want to see both of those disclosures before we make our offer. Also keep in mind, if the home that we're making an offer on is part of an estate sale, or if it is a foreclosure, there will be no seller's disclosure because the people selling the home did not actually live in the home, whether it's an estate sale or a foreclosure. Title insurance. Okay, this is the next section of your purchase agreement. And title insurance, there's title insurance that the seller pays for, and there's title insurance that the buyer pays for. Now remember a little bit ago when we were talking about types of financing, and if you're an FHA or a VA buyer, or heck, if you're any buyer, even in a multiple offer situation, and you're just wanting to make your offer as appealing as possible, then one thing you might consider doing is offering to pay for the seller's portion of title insurance. This is not something you have to do, but you might budget about $1,200 for this expense. It would be due at closing, but it's one more thing that you can do to make your offer more appealing. Another thing you can do to make your offer more appealing has to do with property taxes. So in the state of Indiana, we pay for property taxes 1 full year in arrears, or 1 full year behind. So when we get to closing, we want to make sure, here's the way an offer is typically written. We want to make sure that the taxes, the property taxes, have been prorated through the day of closing. That seems fair. The seller will pay for all of the taxes up until the day of closing, and you, the buyer, will take over from there. However, one more thing that you can do to sweeten your offer is instead of doing the prorated taxes, you just offer to begin paying taxes at the next installment. In the state of Indiana, our property taxes are due in May and November. So let's say you're making an offer in September and you offer to begin paying taxes in November. Then your offer, again, is going to be more appealing to that seller because they're not going to have to bring as much money to closing. That part's kind of confusing. Don't even pretend to try to understand it. It's okay. Just know that that's one more tool that you can use to make a more competitive offer in this competitive market. HOA. Okay, love them or hate them, but if you are going to be making an offer on a home that is part of a homeowners association, just know that we're going to be asking for all of that documentation for you to be able to review as soon as possible. Now, sometimes that homeowners association documentation comes through, maybe it's 40 years old and it has been photocopied over and over and over, and it's really hard to read. I'm just going to warn you, sometimes that happens. But if you've got a question about, are fences allowed in this neighborhood? What kind of fences? Are mini barns allowed? Can you park a boat in the driveway? Drive through the neighborhood, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to get your questions answered as far as what types of fences are allowed, are mini barns allowed, what can you park in your driveway. Make sure you get all of those questions answered and that you're satisfied with the answer before making an offer. And last but not least, this is something that a lot of agents don't pay attention to as much as they should, but it's regarding the expiration of our offer. In a normal market, we would probably give the seller 24 hours to respond to our offer. However, in the market that we've been in during the pandemic, where it's a very hot seller's market, the sellers are looking at multiple offers. Again, that still applies to you. If you're looking at that $250 or less price point, here at the recording of this video, I want to know, when I'm submitting your offer, I'm going to ask that listing agent how many other offers do they have on the table, and if we put an expiration date of 3 hours, can you get an answer from your seller? The longer time we give them, a sharp agent on the other end is going to milk that for every minute possible. And they're just going to sit on our offer, and they're basically going to pimp it out and see how many other offers they can get. Because human nature, as soon as one person is interested in a property, then everybody else gets interested in it too. We don't want that to happen. And we're going to be as aggressive as possible when making our offer and when asking for a response time from the seller.